experience we can rely on. So it's probably my professional habits. So in my previous life, I used to analyze the games I played. So and I wanted to look back and to find out what are the relevant lessons of the past that will help us to work out the strategy for the future.
Right, and that was certainly, as far as putting the book together and the structure, what was originally another one of the stories of the creation of the book was that it got much longer than anticipated, because we kept finding lessons. We were kind of thinking it was the rise and fall of Russian democracy, so we'd be starting, with the fall of Yeltsin, and going, and then they just kept churning up more and more interesting and important pieces of information from before that to set the stage of what happened and what didn't happen, and how things could have been done differently, and who this book is addressed to. Again, we want to prevent these mistakes for next time. How when you're looking at the world, you're looking at the switch, this massive switch of all these countries, Eastern Europe and of course Soviet Union, all these republics, from dictatorship, from communist totalitarianism to some form of democracy beginnings. What went wrong, and that's really suddenly became a very interesting element of your own life as far as observing these things. And the way the book starts, actually, the scene of tearing down the statue, and you think, wow, this is.
Some people remember that.
Yes,
August 91.
Yeah. All right. As far as the statue of Felix Dzerzhinsky, who founded the
founder of KGB.
KGB, and how can you go from that to just 9 years later?
Yes, less than 9 years later, you had the KGB lieutenant colonel taking over the country. Yeah. So what's happened? What did go wrong? So was it inevitable? So could Russia escape? The same rotten past? And again, it's Putin year 2000. So and now Putin in 2016. So these 16 years again. Did we have any choice? So was it, like in chess, the forced combination, or we still had, other options? And I thought it would be very important to actually demonstrate the way that a Putin dictatorship was built. There's no dictator, just creates, it's a dictatorship, it's full-blown one-man dictatorship. Next day he's in power. So it always takes time. So even for the greatest evils of the 20th century, like Hitler and Stalin, it took time before they actually consolidated power and to turn their respective countries into one-man, full-blown dictatorship. And I tried to analyze what's happened in Russia, and it's I couldn't avoid this criticism towards Western leaders, because from the very beginning they looked at Putin as the man they could do business with. Though he was quite, quite frank in his you may call opening statements. Even in 1999, being yet the prime minister appointed by Yeltsin and speaking at the KGB headquarters in Lubyanka for his former colleagues, he made very clear: once KGB, always KGB. That's it's words from his mouth. And what was the first action, executive action? Putin's action as the president of Russia to restore Soviet anthem. Now many say it's symbolic. Absolutely, it is symbolic. So it's like a Freudian message. This is what is in my mind if I'm given a chance. So and then he kept repeating. He repeatedly said the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. It's just combining only these three facts. And I could come up with many more. So what did you expect from the man, who just made it very clear from the very beginning about his aspirations? But nevertheless, from the very beginning, he needed friends. And he did it well, as a man from KGB, he knew that he had to make friends, and he did well, with foreign leaders. Probably many of you remember his first meeting with George W. Bush in June 1991. After which Bush said, I looked at his eyes and I saw his soul. I was sick. You're not a shrink. You're not looking at his eyes. You have to look at his record. KGB. Yes, exactly. Just some people saw three big letters, capital letters on his forehead. But, you know, we have to give credit to Putin, you know, he was pretty good, you know, KGB agent. Actually, one, you know, my personal experience, people kept asking me if I ever met Putin. And I said, no, I never met Putin. But then, you know, when I was asked this question 10th or 15th time, so I thought, wait a second. I was in 1996, in March, in St. Petersburg, you know, guest of Anatoly Sobchak, the mayor, then mayor of St. Petersburg. And I was there, you know, I was dining in Sobchak's, you know, just, you know, private cabinet, and I was in Smolny, his residence, and Putin was his deputy. And no doubt, you know, for many, you know, within these few hours I spent in Sobchak's residence, I could have met Putin, but I couldn't remember, and I have pretty good memory. So, by the way, it tells you about, you know, his qualities. You know, he was there, I have no doubt about it, but I couldn't remember him.
He was good.
Yes. So, and the way, you know, he dealt with Bush is also, you know, I would call it a masterpiece in relations. You know, he knew that Bush was a devoted Christian, so that's why he sold him a story about, you know, him, Putin, being secretly baptized, you know, hiding the cross, in KGB, hiding the cross, secretly baptized. Okay, come on, this is this. I have enough people who were born in the Soviet Union just to understand, you know, that it was nonsense, but Bush nearly cried. So, and he kept doing it, you know, time and again, because he knew he needed friends. So now he needs enemies, that's another story. But as every dictator, you know, just always, you know, at the time when he has exhausted his agenda by looking for enemies at home, he would need enemies elsewhere. So because he consolidated all the power, and his only way to stay on top is to find enemies and just to present himself as the only, you know, savior of the country from global evil. But we have many cases, you know, of Putin, you know, building these personal relations and also, you know, playing for the audience, whether foreign or domestic. But that's, you know, this personal negotiation one-on-one was always, you know, sort of, it's his, you know, sort of strongest suit.
Right, and that's something that, you know, Gary's written about extensively as far as trying to analyze dictatorship, not just Putin, but kind of the shared characteristics. And that, I thought, was one of the most valuable ones as far as saying, because if you don't have a free media that you have to worry about, or if you completely control that, if you don't have elections to validate your power, how do you do that? And this is how. You control that image. Imagery becomes very, very important. You have this media under your control. And the trip that I think one of the great examples that you found was Putin's trip to the United Nations.
Yeah, that's it.
It's like, why is he coming to the United Nations? He doesn't care about the United Nations. He spits on the United Nations. Obama, why?
And okay, that's how we're jumping, you know, 15 years ahead, you know, to his latest contact with the U.S. president, this time, you know, current one, Barack Obama. It was in September, the end of September last year. So as Nick said, why did Putin come to New York? So this is to the United Nations. He didn't care. So to deliver the speech from this platform, that's another big deal. So when the Wall Street Journal asked, you know, asked to deliver to write an editorial about Putin, Obama, you know, that's just these speaking at the UN General Assembly,
analyzing his speech,
and analyzing Putin's speech, I suggest I would do it in advance. Yeah, because I said, you know, it would be, for me, it was obvious that, you know, it was not about his speech. He could spend 5 minutes or 50 minutes, it didn't matter. What was important for him was to meet Obama. And to show that he, Putin, you know, was dealing only with Obama. So it's like, you know, meeting the big boss. So not wasting his time on just, you know, on sort of people of secondary importance. And he needed to come to New York. And it's probably, many of you saw this picture, you know, this reluctant handshake. You know, when Putin and Obama, they met, and Putin just, you know, he threw his hand very reluctantly. I bet you he spent several hours in front of the mirror, practicing this. No, no. This is the way, you know, he protects his image, because what Russian television showed after this meeting is that, okay, Putin, he had to go to New York because of the United Nations. We have to respect the United Nations. He had to speak there. He had to meet Obama, you know, in New York, in the belly of the beast. But he showed disrespect, and the next day, in the very next day, Russian planes, Russian bombers, they dropped the bombs, at the American-backed opposition in Syria. So this is the image that Putin is calling the shots. He's a big wheel, so he can defy Obama. As long as he can defy Obama, and he knows it, no one in Russia, and every dictator must be afraid of people behind him. Not so much the street, but people behind him. So he knew that by being, by looking so strong, so powerful, so arrogant, and defying Obama and of course other European leaders, so he could be safe from any potential coup, palace coup. That's what he should worry about. So that's, it's from 2001 to 2015, 2016 now. That's, in essence, it's a Putin's way of staying in power. But of course, he, at the beginning, he knew how to sort of build his image of sort of the right person for Russia, a Democrat also at that time was very important, who could change life of ordinary Russians for better. And when many people asked me, time and again about what I call the failure of Russian opposition to reveal the true colors of Putin's regime, my response was, look, even for those in Russia who could believe Boris Nemtsov, Garri Kasparov and the like in, say, 2006, 2007, we had very little opportunity to address this audience because comparing to what's happening today in Russia, those were vegetarian years. Yeah, so we still could say something, but the amount of information that we could pass to the Russian audience was still minimal because we were more or less shouting in the desert. But even for those who could hear what we said, on Channel 1 they could see the picture of Putin hosting G8 summit with Bush, Blair, Berlusconi, Chirac, Merkel, Harper from Canada. So even for intelligent people, should they believe us? Maybe we are just, we are a bit paranoid. Or all the leaders of the free world, hugging Putin, being part of this, this show. So Putin knew how to build credentials, and he's very good. I mean, the strength of Putin's regime is it's not an ideological regime. This is not Stalin. This is not Hitler. This is not Mao Zedong. He can wear any hat. So he could be, whatever is convenient. Right now, he's of course a nationalist, he's imperialist, and he will be, this is the last game he can play. That's why I believe, he's doomed because he lost, room. He lost his ability to maneuver. So, but in the 16 years, we saw Putin wearing different hats, playing different roles, and we have to give him credit. He did it quite well, at the expense, of course, of Russia, and now we see many neighboring countries and even countries far away from Russia.
Right, and just to put a coat on, the name Garry mentioned, many, of course, who speak Russian know who Boris Nemtsov was, but the book is dedicated to Boris Nemtsov. And if you want to say, just since we mentioned his name, I think a lot of people. Yeah, okay,
that's I thought it was more than appropriate to dedicate the book. So it was when we submitted the proposal, Boris was still alive, and for me it was one of the most shocking events in recent years. Because I don't know how many, maybe some of you have met him, but he was a really close friend. And it was not just big, physically. It was a man with imposing presence. It was a big voice, he was the first deputy prime minister under Yeltsin. Many believe he was Yeltsin's successor. It's so painful to think what could have happened for Russia and for the world if Yeltsin selected Nemtsov as his successor. Again, maybe it wasn't possible.
Instead of Putin.
Yes, instead of Putin. And Boris actually, told me when I was summoned by investigative committee in Russia of Russian Federation in February 2013 to show up as a witness and to tell them about activities of the opposition groups. That was a very famous Bolotna case that ended up with dozens of people behind bars. And Boris told me, look, you come back, you enter the building, because I was traveling abroad, and if you leave the building, you will be most likely you will be already a suspect. So stay away. Now I still couldn't understand why he didn't follow his own advice, but probably for him it was too much. He was so proud, and he couldn't understand why he should leave our country for just a KGB stooge. And he was right, thinking that they would not take a chance to arrest him. They didn't. They just killed him.
Yeah, he was murdered. We're almost to the 1 year.
Yeah, just in front. Yeah, almost. Yes, it's February 27th, the 1 year, and it's in front of Kremlin. That was, it's, when I hear people asking me about Russian opposition, what kind of opposition you can talk about if the most prominent, member or leader of the opposition, the bravest of all of us, was killed, 150 meters, just outside of Kremlin doors. And of course now they arrested a few people that allegedly killed him, and stopped any attempts to find who actually was behind the murder.
Yeah, that's going to go well. What's the acquittal rate these days in the Russian courts? What's the conviction?
This is a good statistic. We're recently looking at this is anybody, by the way, just can guess. What is the acquittal rates in Russian courts today?
Single digits.
Single digits.
Ooh,
you're too optimistic. 0.4%.
0.4%.
So it's probably it's 10 times worse than under Stalin. It's 0.4%.
Yeah,
people argue, some say 0.5%, but it's way under 1%. So acquittal rate.
Right.
So that gives you an idea about the way the justice serves in Russia.
Right. That's the idea of the fair trial. Just skipped all that trial stuff. It's just such a waste of time.
But also you can see some numbers can correlate, because this is again another popular question. Putin is so popular in Russia. Look at his approval rating, 90% plus. So this is sometimes when you see the dictators 90% plus, the acquittal rate also in single digits.
Yeah.
So this is, and also the interesting things this is the moment you go to 90% plus, suddenly you have the barbed wire surrounding Russian TV station, and Orwell's 1984 makes top 10 books sold in Russia. So this again, certain things are connected. Because everybody understands. So the moment you see 90% plus numbers, they're not real, because nobody knows what is the fear factor. How many people are comfortable telling what they think about ruling the ruling party, or even worse, about the dictator, who comes from KGB. And again, many people, they were still born in the Soviet Union, they remember what it is. Yeah. And also, any polling, it's based on anonymous calls. Somebody calls you, and I'm almost, surprised that we have 10, 15, at one point 20% of people who are not saying they love Putin.
Yeah. You get that phone call at home. Hi, we're wondering what you think of. It takes a lot of courage. Yeah, really, you want to find those 20%, 15%. They're very brave people. And one of the things we talk about in the book as well, as far as putting the lie to these numbers, because this is something we've been dealing with in the beginning, the Putin is popular thing. Because at first it was Putin as a Democrat. And so we've had these what we call the myths of the Putin regime that we've been dealing with since Garry, retired from chess in 2005 and started moving into this, this world of trying to communicate what's really happening there. And the one we kept running into was, well, he has elections. They're not completely fair, but okay, look at what happened in Florida in 2000 in the United States. And people were shocked. There was only one media source. No, so the comparisons get a little awkward, but the bottom line, I think we've always used this kind of verification, is if you're that popular, you can have free and fair elections. If you're really that popular, you don't have to control the media or have barbed wire in front of the television sets. And opposition members don't get killed on a regular basis and jailed whenever there's a protest, if you're actually popular. So the whole Putin is popular myth we've been beating on for 10 years, and it's still alive. Even now on this book tour, some of the, but the Russians, what was Bill Maher, 7 or 8 years ago? But the Russians love a strong man. Like it's this drives me crazy, because it's like, what is it, what did you call the genetic theory of dictatorship?
It's kind of genetic predetermination. So there's a belief that, the certain nations do not, fit, democratic institutions. We can start, endless debate about Russia or about maybe Arab Spring. But, unfortunately for those who are promoting this theory, we have a couple of examples, about people of the same origin. So when you look at North Korea, it's one gulag. It's the worst dictatorship on this planet. And if you're not aware about the existence of South Korea, you can come up with a theory that all Koreans are born slaves and they couldn't live without a strong leader. But unfortunately for the theory, you have South Korea, one of the most vibrant economies and stable democracy. So then you look at China, and you get the same story about China. What about Taiwan? The tiny rocky island with the same Chinese people. And I'm not talking about West and East Germany. But now, even if we talk about Russia, so and looking at the current events, in Ukraine, so what Ukraine called Eastern Front. Anybody could imagine, there's the Eastern Front of Ukraine. So that's why when people ask me about, Mr. Kasparov, can you tell us, Russia in 10 years? I said 10 years. So what about 5? What about 5 years? What about 5 months?
Yeah.
So we'd like to know what will happen in 10 weeks. No, we want to hear it. So, look, anybody, who is just, trying to make a prediction for 10 years from now, should be disregarded as not serious. Because show me one person who could predict 2 years ago, in January 2014, the annexation of Crimea.
Yeah, you.
Yes.
Other than you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, but I did it in February. Yes,
February,
actually, early February. So you were just, at the end of Sochi Olympics. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's just, and anybody who could say, just 2 years ago, that is what we will have, Russia, fighting war with Ukraine, occupying, part of Donbass, Russian planes bombing Syrian cities. I mean, this person will be kicked out, from serious debate because it would sound so ridiculous. So that's why, you have to understand that, we're living at a time that is just, things are changing so fast. So that's why we don't have the luxury of making long-term predictions. So, and going back to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, if you look at the map, and you take two cities, Belgorod and Kharkiv, then you know the map. So it's about 200 miles, probably less, 150 miles. Belgorod on the Russian side of the border, Kharkiv on the Ukrainian side of the border. We're talking about ethnic Russians on both sides. There was no border in the Soviet Union. The border after 1991 was also quite, quite imaginary. People could go back and forth. So you're talking about same people with the same history, same language, but boys from Belgorod, they are fighting in Putin's invading army. Boys from Kharkiv, they're fighting in Ukrainian army against the invaders. So that tells you that it's not, it's not automatic. This is not, generic. This is something about, conditions. And what was the difference with Russia and Ukraine? The fundamental difference that in 1994, Ukrainian sitting president, Kravchuk, lost elections. Since 1994, Ukrainians sort of got a taste of changing the government through the ballot. It's happened. And, many presidents lost elections there, the governments were changed. So this is a difference. In Russia, it didn't happen. And that was, in my view, that was one of the biggest problems that we're still facing because, there's a very small, very narrow window of opportunity that we had from 91, 90 to 93 was wasted because, we couldn't, Russian people couldn't get, this sense of being empowered by using the ballot to change the government.
Right. What did you say? I mean, this is important before we get to some more current events. As far as what happened, why didn't democracy take root, and what was what you called, I think, a fundamental misconception about what democracy meant to you as a Soviet citizen, even. And you were obviously an exception in that you traveled the world, starting as a teen, as a chess player, so you had the opportunity to see what was real and what was propaganda to a degree, and what democracy did and did not do. But for the Russian people on the whole, you could, you talked and you understood. I think you've said before that there was just a fundamental misunderstanding of what it would mean to their lives.
I think that's one of the reasons that the collapse of communism was relatively painless. So as it didn't, and bloodless. It didn't lead to the same, disasters in Yugoslavia. Though, of course, if you are from, Caucasian region, so Abkhazia, Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh, or Transnistria, Moldova, so it was different. But still, considering the size of former Soviet Union, it was relatively calm. I think one of the reasons that by the end of '80s, nobody had any belief in communism. So it was like an empty shell, and people knew that the communism lost the competition to the free world. So the idea was that we had to do something else, and by changing the framework of the state, we could improve our living standards. I think for majority of people in the Soviet Union, probably almost for all of us, democracy automatically meant high living standards. So if we could just move from one-party system to a multi-party democracy, so then it's the rest is automatic. You go to the ballots, you just you vote, and it could lead you immediately to to better life. And many people did it, and they were very faithful in supporting Yeltsin. Even in 1993, in the midst of one of the worst economic hardships, Yeltsin won the referendum, and even 53% supported his socio-economic policies. But you can vote once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, but I mean there were no improvements. Actually, for many millions, tens of millions, it turned
Life got worse.
Things got worse. So that's why I think there was quite a disappointment. It's just, and probably it's even confusion. And then let's not forget, Putin took over when the oil price went up. Again, only for people who are watching these sort of the macroeconomic studies, they know that the highest GDP growth in Russia was the year 2000. Actually, year 2000, more than 10%. Industrial output grew more than 12%. Of course, it was mainly the result of 1998 financial crash, but still, during the 90s, with this feeble the foundation for democracy and some,
some reforms.
Yes, very mild market reforms. Yeah, the foundation was created for market forces to play their role. And in 2001, 2002, 2003, suddenly for many people, it was like, wow,
things are good.
Things are good. And Putin never canceled elections officially, so that's why majority believe that was a form of democracy we were looking for and waiting for. So Putin's first term, actually the second term, from 2000 to 2008, created Russian middle class, still relatively small in size, because we're probably talking about 10 to 15% of the overall population. But concentrated in big cities, and even the rest of the country could get something. So the standards of consumption in Russia, they were higher than at any time before. Okay, we know it because oil prices jumped from $10 in 1998 to nearly $150 in 2007. But if you're ordinary citizen in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, Novosibirsk, you shouldn't care. So you could see it's an improvement, and that's how Putin, gained his credit that he's almost wasted today, but it helped him to stay afloat for so long.
Right. One item as far as before we get to the current events and as well as the American perspective, as far as the why in that subtitle of why Vladimir Putin means the free world must be stopped, is one story from the book that I will use because there was a nice element to it that we didn't include in the book that we're going to share with you today, which was a good story of your personal involvement. And one of the things that was interesting working on the book with Garry was trying to kind of fill in where was Garry during all of these major events, and that's because it's his narrative. So you can't just rely on what this isn't Wikipedia. It has to be personal. It has to be these things. So it was kind of like this ongoing interview and his political involvement. And one of the ones that's these early interviews of this young firebrand who's this chess player, Soviet, but getting a lot of attention in the West and giving these interviews and getting in trouble for them, and getting in trouble with your mother perhaps for that one in Playboy, but which we'll talk about later. But the one that was mentioning your mother was as far as an early moment of political activism, when this is, still the Soviet Union is still there. People tend to think of it as this just kind of faded away, Gorbachev, everything was good. But and it was related to chess. And there's a fun story there about the flag, as far as the types of protests that were available. Now they're none available, but at the time, political protest was, shall we say, more subtle.
Yeah, it's
a New York story.
Yeah, it's a New York story. It's my last match was Anatoly Karpov, the fifth one in 1990 that was split between New York and the city of Lyon in France. So the first half of the match we played in New York and in October, early November year 1990. At that time I already, had my, I made my views towards communism and Soviet Union known, but it was the first protest of that size. I refused to play in the Soviet flag. So I was the first athlete, if you can call chess players athletes. So if so, I was probably, one of the most, or maybe the most decorated athlete in Soviet Russian history. So, I said I would not fly in the Soviet flag. So I wanted to fly the Russian flag. So, of course, there was no Russian flag available.
What Russian flag?
Yes, it's this. I had to show up in the CBS this morning, showroom, and my mother, just during the night, she tried to compose.
To make a Russian
flag, she had just a stick and and a few ribbons, to cut them, to make sure we know they're it's in the right order. So and when I showed up there, so they looked at this flag and said, "What it is?" So this is this because nobody saw it before.
Like French flag, Dutch flag,
French, Dutch, Luxembourg. So it was quite a statement, and of course, Karpov's delegation, pressed by Moscow, they made one protest another, and then after Game 4, International Chess Federation decided that a Russian flag had to be removed from the table, but alongside was a Soviet flag, so we played with no flags. So I treated it as my psychological victory.
And then he came to the Game 5 with a little Russian flag.
Yes, okay, yes, I had a pin, yes.
All right, we'll jump a little forward. As far as the why in the subtitle, and this is one that we've been seeing a lot of and having this conversation, we've had this book tour in the United States, and you've given, I thought, kind of breaking it down into two answers, as far as why should Americans care. Here we are, you said you wanted the book to be part of the 2016 election debates on foreign policy. What is the American role in the world? Is it America's job to stand up to dictators, or to ISIS for that matter, or to stand up to Putin in Syria, or to Iran? And I thought, just to kind of frame it a little bit, because we're kind of running it low on time, is, two answers. One is kind of ideological, as far as the America that you remember from the Soviet Union, from behind the Iron Curtain, as far as what America stands for, and can it be a force for good in the world. And then we'll maybe do that one first, and then talk about the practical element of why it actually matters to Americans, even if they don't care at all about foreign policy, or about Putin, or Bashar al-Assad, and can't find these places on the map, maybe, and why it still matters.
As I said earlier that I wanted to see the a new debate about foreign policy, and I think we correctly predicted that foreign policy would play a major role in these elections. And the book actually shows that from 1991, from the end of the Cold War and collapse of the Soviet Union to these days, American foreign policy lost its consistency, because from Harry Truman to Ronald Reagan, it was fairly consistent. You could see, some changes and deviations, but it was in a range, from Democrats to Republicans. But again, it was an existential enemy, so there was the fight between the free world and communism, and all the presidents, made their contribution to make sure that this fight would be won. So from 1991, this is the last year of Bush 41, to these days, we could see U.S. foreign policy working more like a pendulum. So just it slides from one side to another. Bill Clinton did very little, George W. did too much, Obama has been doing nothing. So and why it's dangerous? Because it's America is still, whether some people like it or don't, it's by far the most powerful nation on the planet. And if you hear a lot, global policemen, there's no room anymore for global policemen. Yeah, you may not like global policemen, but try to live in a neighborhood without police. So it's America played a role, was a factor that could actually keep forces that are unleashed these days under control. Like look at the Middle East. So America is out. Is it a safer place? Was the Middle East safe for 2008 in 2008 or today? So now you have Saudi Arabia and Iran almost on the verge of the war. So I thought it would be very important to actually look for bipartisan not agreement but concept to restore the role of America in the world and to adjust it to the modern realities. Because what's happened in 1991, and I think we yet to understand the consequences of the collapse of the Soviet Union, because it created a brand new world. And when when the story is over, and that's also one of the ideas of the book Winter's Coming. So it's not just paying an homage to a great book and TV show.
Game of Thrones.
Yes, Game of Thrones. Yes, yeah. But it's also the idea that the history is not linear. It always goes in seasons. So that's why we are entering just another cold season. So and exactly as in Game of Thrones, winter is coming means that we have dark and dangerous times ahead of us. When you reach at the end of the period, you have to come up with a new plan. So what's happened in 91, 92? The world badly needed a new vision, a plan. So how to create institutions that could help us to solve problems instead of freezing them. The end of the World War II saw the creation of the United Nations. Yeah, it was a useful institution, but only to freeze conflicts, because the whole idea was to prevent an open war between the USSR and the United States. But in 1991, 1992, we could look for solutions, and relying on the United Nations, which is it's built for gridlock, because if you want to freeze something, you need a gridlock. So to solve problems was not a very smart move. But naturally, Bill Clinton, he had no experience, but it's not only him, it was an overall excitement. And Fukuyama's famous best-selling book, The End of History, just was a reflection. I also, share this belief that, that was the end of history, and this is the liberal democracy won, and now we could just, we could go to disco. So it's the, now, it was wrong. Again, history doesn't end. Evil can, disappear from from the front, but it could be buried on the rubble of Berlin Wall, but it always sprouts out. Going back to the mid-40s, we should remember that it was the end of the World War II and the beginning of the Cold War, because the United States discovered, and also Western Europe, that there was a new threat from communism. So, it's really hard to imagine that, despite this economic hardship and, the expectations of millions of Americans and Europeans that we could start, a new life, in peace and friendship. So, the new threat, pushed Harry Truman to create new institutions. How many new institutions were built in the 40s to address adequately this threat that was coming from the East? National Security Council, NATO, CIA, Voice of America. So it's a Marshall Plan for Europe. So, and it's all at the time when America was in a very different mood. So we don't know yet, how to build these institutions now, what is required, but it's very important that this debate, to be reopened, because it's, unless it's bipartisan, it's very difficult to carry through. And for those who say, oh, it's all far away, and we shouldn't care. Now, in the 21st century, the distance is no longer an obstacle. So, in 2001, 15 years ago, 19 terrorists in few hours, in 2 hours, actually, or less than 2 hours, killed more Americans than the entire Japanese fleet, 60 years before. So, and we understand that today, in 2016, the ability of terrorists to cause damage to this country or to the free world as a whole, it's almost limitless. Because we, whether we like it or not, we created new tools. So and these tools are agnostic. When somebody says this is progress, yes, it is a progress, but it could be used both ways. The progress could be used for treating people or killing people. Unfortunately, now just using these kind of tools for like social networks to recruit people for destruction, it's proved to be easier than to use them for charitable purposes.
Right. Now, for the New York cynics, though, for those many, again, Barack Obama won 2 elections and very much had a mandate for withdrawal, again, being the anti-W. Bush. Again, as you said, you did way too much, and Obama said, we are going to bring the boys home, we're going to bring the troops home, we're going to withdraw our influence, from the Middle East, whether that means, with Putin or with Iran. We're going to sign agreements, and we're going to rely on diplomacy. American people have no more appetite for this. We spent trillions of dollars, with Iraq, Afghanistan. It was a huge disaster, and let's go. And you're saying that's the other extreme. Now, again, from a cynical perspective, though, again, even if you say, fine, let it burn, like as we now have, the Donald Trumps and the Cruz and these guys are, saying, or Rand Paul, saying, okay, let them figure it out. Or even better, Trump, let them kill each other. That's charming. But that attitude, again, there is a constituency for that, or they wouldn't be saying it. There are supporters of that, and you see them, not just at Trump rallies, but otherwise. And so even if you don't believe that, more spiritual, I guess you could say, the role of America as a global policeman or as a shining beacon on a hill, in the words of Kennedy and Reagan, the more, shall we say, economic argument, because that's what they say, we need to fix the problems here. We can't go around, messing, fighting in the Middle East or elsewhere. We need to fix the problems here.
Yeah, but that's a very important point, because America is the most globalized economy on this planet. So, and if you're the most globalized economy, you need global trade. So it's global finance. So just, you need labor to be moved from one place to another. So America benefits directly from globalization. So millions and millions of American jobs depend on globalization. So how are you going to disengage from political issues and to keep your economically engaged? Because it's not going to work. So it's either you are engaged, every front, or you will be, just pushed from sort of every direction. And those who are trying to say, okay, America first, and let's solve economic problems, they just don't understand that America and the free world now facing a new existential enemy. Because we created a world which is, as I said, globalized. It's getting smaller every day. And we still have Putin, we still have Iranian mullahs, we still have North Korean dictators, we still have Chavistas in Venezuela, and the Cuban dictators, you name them. 50 years ago, and of course 100 years ago, we could live, just happily, divided by oceans without paying much attention to these guys. Today, no. We can find out what's happening in Indonesia, or even in North Korea, by measuring, the
light output.
Yes, the amplitude, the seismic amplitude there. So within a split of a second, so just it's all in your, it could be in your pocket. Now, but that means that people in these countries, whether it's Russia or other former Soviet republics like Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, or in the Middle East, or in Iran, or in North Korea, no, that's probably the only country, in China, they also know what is happening in the free world. So what is the rationale for Putin's of this world, of all these thugs and dictators to stay in power, forever? They have to come up with a new mythology. They have to come up with a plan. And there's only one justification: an open confrontation, endless confrontation. Because they cannot compete with the free world with ideas, with productivity, with innovations. They have only one competitive advantage. It's the value of human life. For all of us, you know, the loss of one life is a tragedy. For them, a million lives is a demonstration of their strength. So they know that confrontation gives them, you know, sort of an upper hand, and they can always, you know, come back to their, you know, to the oppressed in their countries, saying, we are here, you know, because without us, without me, Putin, without Iranian mullahs, without, you know, Kim's dynasty dictatorship in North Korea, you guys are lost because you're surrounded by enemies. So they will keep pushing. They will not stop. And again, the world is getting smaller. So if somebody thinks that you can walk away from any explosive region and it will, you know, it will guarantee peace, welcome to Obama's world. He did it. He proved it. He walked away from the Middle East. And again, you know, I'm not here to start this endless debate about 2003 invasion of Iraq. It was not probably the smartest move, but as somebody who was born in a communist and raised in a communist country, you know, I cannot force myself to criticize a decision that led to the collapse of a dictatorship. But let's, you know, set it aside. You know, we had a certain situation in 2008, 2009, which was far from ideal, but it was a new situation. It's like in the game of chess, you know, you chose the wrong plan, you reach a certain position and say, oh, maybe I have to go back 6 moves and start playing it again. No, because it's a game. You have other guys playing. So trying to actually restore the balance that has been already lost many years ago led to a disaster that we're facing now. And things could have only worse. And what's happened under Obama is a dramatic loss of prestige of the United States. The Oval Office doesn't carry the same power as before. Because, you know, people say, oh, it's not Obama, it's Bush. No, it's this big, between invading and appeasement, there is a massive territory called leadership. It's a great territory because, you know, it's not black and white, it's not like in chess, but you can do a lot of great things, and it's very important that you are in the position to make a credible threat. And unfortunately now, if you send troops all over the place, you don't make credible threats. If you remove troops from everywhere, and everybody knows that you will do it no matter what, you are no longer, you know, making credible threats. So we saw in the last 16 years, you know, dramatic, you know, damage made to the presidency of the United States, which, you know, helped other guys, those bad guys, to actually understand that there are plenty of territories, there are plenty of territories to grab, and a lot of opportunities for them to sort of extend their influence. And it's, you know, whoever is elected in 2016, this year, in November 2016, and will be sworn into office in January 2017, will have to deal with this problem. Unfortunately, what we know from the past, and that's why I mentioned, you know, it's the book was addressing, you know, these issues. Appeasement always leads to big wars. You're trying to avoid smaller conflicts, you end up with a bigger war. And I mean, for those who say that, oh, it's I mean, confronting these guys is too dangerous today because they keep saying, you know, it's too dangerous, it's very hard, you know, and eventually it becomes impossible. And my response is, look, I mean, I understand Putin is a dangerous guy. I understand Iran is, well, you know, it's also a big enemy. But can you compare these forces with Joseph Stalin in 1948? Is anybody going to tell me that Vladimir Putin, who runs Russia, which is, you know, a pale shadow of the Soviet Union, economically, militarily, you know, demographically, is more dangerous than Joseph Stalin in 1948, where Harry Truman ordered, you know, airlifting supplied to West Berlin, and for 11 months, American and British planes supplied West Berlin with everything that the people needed there, and Stalin hasn't shot a single plane, because dictators, they have quite a unique animal instinct. They can smell blood, and if they smell blood, they go up for a kill. If they smell strength, they back off. And Stalin knew that Harry Truman was not the person to mess up this.
Well, one of the nice things on the tour was that we got to make some side stops, and well, actually a speaking engagement as well, but at some of the presidential museums, and so got to be at the Truman Museum,
Yeah,
the
Truman Library.
the Truman Library
In Kansas, that's in Independence, that's Kansas City.
Right, and then also there was a Reagan Center in Santa Barbara, and when they tried to ask Garry about 2016, and you always have the nice dodge. You can say, well, I can't vote here. I'm not a citizen. So he doesn't have to make his endorsement. He says, but as far as being bipartisan, I'd be a Truman Democrat
and Reagan Republican.
and a Reagan Republican. Unfortunately, there are no.
Yes, it's just people are trying, just to actually square, us, and make, just you are just, you're President Obama, basically you're a neocon, okay, but it's just I remember I spoke in Harvard and I said, look, just read, JFK's inaugural speech. I'm very comfortable with Truman and JFK. The problem is that, this is the way they saw the world is no longer popular in their own party. So unfortunately, we could see, there's a new breed of the GOP guys that, just could be, they could mention Reagan all the time, but what they do is just exactly the opposite.
Take some questions here. I don't know how many languages we got questions in.
Well, Meg actually can do Spanish.
Can we do Spanish? Well, this is good. We have to do this one. You must have put this one on top because we're just discussing this, and you were asking for odds on how long Putin would last, and that's kind of if you're a betting man. We'll take a look at that one just to show that we're not cherry picking the questions. Take that one on the first one. How long will Putin rule, in your opinion? That's the ones you want to like unpack. But that's certainly a tricky one because as I think we said one a line. I don't remember if it was an op-ed or in a book about how long the Putin rules. It's like, do you know how long it will be? You had a good joke.
No, it's this when people ask about Putin's future. Look, the bad news is I don't know how long he's going to stay in office. The good news, he also doesn't know. If we are to believe history, and I read enough history books to know that he's not going to, to die in peace. So it will be fairly brutal because it's again quoting John F. Kennedy. So those who are making peaceful evolution impossible, they make violent revolution inevitable. So that's you may call it political mechanics. So I have a few questions here in Russia. So Russian.
You gotta give a shout out. We gotta do some of the Russian questions.
Okay, this is the question. Okay, it's about political spring in Russia. So it's changes in Russia. They are inevitable. So what is your vision about the future of Russia? Are you planning to participate in the presidential elections in Russia? Yeah. Who could be the president of Russia? Now, I'll try to just sort of give a concise answer because they are just all connected. Recently, I on Kasparov.ru, so because I run stories in both languages, so you can look at Kasparov and my Facebook and Twitter, both in Russian and in English. And Kasparov.ru is one of the leading opposition websites, banned in Russia, of course.
I was going to say, we want to sneak in an answer about, is it possible for people in Russia to get unbiased news? I think that fits in perfectly. Banned his news website. You cannot access it inside Russia.
No, it's still, yes, it's a lot of people, getting in. So it's and I had this New Year's Q&A session with dozens of questions, and one of them actually I put on my Facebook with a lot of comments. Is about, I call it, Russia after Putin, and I tried to give my, not my vision, but just to share a few ideas. And actually, I'm planning now a much bigger article because it was a huge response. A lot of people asked me about, to make further comments. why I think the question about the presidency of Russia is relevant, because I don't know what country Russia will be after Putin. If somebody knows, I would like you to share this, this vision, because again, what we know from history is that when dictatorships like Putin's one, collapse, it could lead to the collapse of the country. So, are you sure that Russia can survive in its current geographical borders? You look at the Far East with China. That China is not hiding its long-term plans of grabbing pieces of territory, and so far, China believes that about 1/3 of Russian territory is temporarily occupied. Yeah, and you look at the demographics, from Novosibirsk to Vladivostok, there are about 20 million Russian citizens, facing what? 250 million or more of Chinese people on the other side of the border, and nobody knows how many Chinese inside Russia already. 10 years ago, I remember I was traveling, in that part of the world, from Vladivostok to Irkutsk, and I heard in Irkutsk a very sad joke. Chinese are crossing our borders in small groups, 100,000 each. So that's Far East. Now, what about the south of Russia? I'm sure many of you follow, the development of the relations between Chechen strongman Ramzan Kadyrov and Moscow. You could notice that in the last year, actually after murder of Boris Nemtsov, Kadyrov was no longer talking about being a Putin soldier, but more of the soldier of Allah. Suddenly he's turning, into the defender of faith. So for me, it's a clear signal that he's also he can smell potential changes. And I don't believe, for a moment that Kadyrov would send these, 15, 20, 25,000, Chechen, bandits, to fight for Putin. He would rather create his own caliphate. And who's going to stop him? So I could see that there could be, massive changes, in Russia. Hopefully we can avoid that, but we don't know exactly. And for those who say, oh, that's a reason for Putin to be preserved at any cost, my answer is, it's not looking good today if Putin goes, but tomorrow it will be worse. And 2 days after it will be much worse, because what Putin does as every dictator, he creates political desert. And longer the dictator stays in power, the drier the desert is. And what kind of creatures can survive in a dry desert? Snakes, scorpions, rats. Yeah, camels. Okay, fine. Camels. Good, thank you. It gives reason for optimism. Yeah, it's the. So I think that is just when we look at this transition. Let's fantasize the transition. And people say, oh, we need just to go into the elections, And my response was, no. You cannot have elections next day. Because, even if you have Putin, whatever happens with him. So he disappears. Magic wand, whatever, just handkerchiefs, scarves, whatever is being used, he disappears. Again, by political mechanics, the power will be in the hands of those who are near the throne. Medvedevs of this world. Do you expect them to build democracy in Russia? So this is I was harshly criticized, and of course a lot of people, from the Kremlin side. Kasparov has been advocating, no election period in Russia. Absolutely, because election is not, it's not just go into the ballot box. Election is a very complicated process that is like, it's on the top of the is the entire democratic, framework. So, first question is where to? What kind of body we should elect. The second is what rules. The third one, who's going to handle it. So, what I think is needed, is basically to understand what kind of country Russia will be after Putin. So, in 2 years we'll be celebrating. I don't know whether it's remembering the 100th anniversary. People talk about 1917, the Bolsheviks takeover. I'm talking about January 1918, where the Bolsheviks, actually that was a real takeover because they dispersed the legally, or just, it's rightfully elected body of Russian representatives that had to decide for the future of Russia. I think that's the moment that if we have a chance, we should do the same. We should understand what Russia will look like. By the way, I doubt very much that a majority of this representative body, if it's elected, will vote for a strong presidency. I think Russia will not have strong presidents. I think it will be more like representative office, that father of the nation, with government being appointed by the parliament. And then we will need a period, a transition period where we have to solve problems, with what I call de-Sovietization, and more important, de-KGBization of the country. And before you do that, you cannot run any democratic process because they will be around. So you want the same guys, just to participate in this process. And of course, you have to decide what to do with these massive fortunes of Putin's buddies. All these Timchenko's, Rotenbergs, Kovalchuks, and you start naming them from the fourth list. So are we...
Kasparov here in Brooklyn.
Sorry?
Kasparov in Brooklyn, who wants
Yeah, okay.
Miami Beach.
Yes.
Well, they found Lesson's body in D.C. recently.
No, you cannot go after everybody at the end of the day, but you just definitely have to re-establish the country. You have to decide how you're going to run the country. By the way, we will not have luxury anymore of Putin's multi-billion funds allocated from oil and gas sales. Money is running out, and I can bet you, the moment Putin goes, the money will disappear also. So the new government in Russia, whatever transition, will inherit an empty treasury. Again, we know it from history. So that's why it's a very complicated task, if it's doable at all, to actually to preserve Russia as one geopolitical entity in 21st century. But sooner we see Putin going, better our chances. As for myself, I believe that I could play a role by just helping my country. And I'm well known inside or outside the country. And I've enough glory in my life, so I don't have to run for an office. So I would like to see Russia to become a positive factor. Russia as a country contributing to the development of human race and helping the civilized world to face its existential enemies. What I call time travelers, ISIS and other thugs and dictators and terrorists.
This is like 5 questions worth right there. Yeah. That answered like half of the questions I picked out as far as the future of Russia, but there are a few. I'll pick out, no questions for me once again. Thanks. There are a few that
okay, I was just like,
some of these are quick and I may be able to answer, but one I thought was interesting because it touches on what you're talking about and how the book itself says enemies of the free world, not just Putin. It's about where he will strike next or what these areas are, and this is something we're seeing. Garry touched on it briefly about what happens when the United States walks away and says, "Well, you sort it out regionally." So Iran and Saudis can sort that out. North Korea just tested possibly a hydrogen bomb, tested a nuclear device, and the U.S. State Department's response was, "We're hoping China will take the lead on that." It's like, well, fingers crossed, it's like, great, so that makes me feel so much safer. But that attitude as far as like where Putin will strike next, we know that there will be a next. That's more the issue. It's like you can guess where, and like you made the joke about where, we don't mention Syria in the book, but you said you might go south, but not that far south. But
no, that's quite good. It's quite typical for the State Department, run by Kerry. It's waiting for China to take a lead in North Korea, waiting for Putin to take a lead on Ukraine, waiting for Iran to take a lead in Syria, now waiting for Saudi Arabia to take a lead on Iran. So it's just they're waiting for American enemies, to lead on U.S. foreign policy and global security. So Kerry is just it's such a, great man for all the jokes, because I looked at him, I couldn't believe the man runs, the US State Department. So when I see him sitting with Lavrov, I'm getting scared. Yeah, because every time, they end up these negotiations.
It's the Russian foreign minister.
It's just, it's just,
Sergei Lavrov.
oh yeah, it's just, it's always ends up, with Putin's agenda, prevailing. So at one point I suggested, that maybe, Obama should appoint Lavrov, the Secretary of State to cut the middleman. Yeah, and I was also afraid, that if they stayed for too long, in one room negotiating, Kerry could give up Alaska. Yeah.
Give it back, yeah.
Give it back, yes.
It might take it, might be a deal there for you. We'll do this one, and I think a lot of people might not be aware of it. This made the news. I'll read the whole thing. It says, I'm a Russian adoptee, adopted in 1996 when there were hundreds of thousands of children in Russian orphanages. I was very upset at Putin's ban. And many people aren't aware of this, or not even aware of the reason. It's one of the most horrible things that Putin has done.
That's typical. That was his response to Magnitsky list. There was list that actually Boris and I worked together. Just to make it happen. So and then the bunch of Russian crooks and criminals. They were the visa ban and the assets could be arrested. And as a response, they banned adoption of Russian orphans.
They banned Americans from adopting Russian orphans. Like, as if to
Not
say,
Americans, so
this is the revenge.
Foreigners, eventually all the foreigners.
But to me, and people ask, well, why? What is that? That's not a, how does this lead to that? And to me, again, getting inside the head of the dictators, to show he could, to show what he was capable of. It's like, you think you can hurt me? I'm going to punish Russian orphans. And you think you're going to, ban me or put my guys on a list? Look at this.
No, this is the way that Putin plays the game now. So I'm so crazy, don't even try, just to sort of to make me angry. Because imagine if I could basically kill tens of thousands of Russian orphans. Imagine what I can do to your kids. So that's the message. So but I think it's a game, but it just shows the state of mind. He's paranoid. So and every time it's like drug user, he needs sort of these. It's a bigger injection.
And this gets to the other one. What about the photos of Putin shirtless on a horse? Have become very popular memes in the West. But this goes to what you talked before. The image is everything. Again, you don't have elections. You don't have a media. You can't make your case normally, democratically. So what do you have? You have propaganda. Anybody here, and we get this all the time. Oh well, American news is propaganda too. You're like, or Fox News is this, or the New York Times is completely in the tank for Obama. It's just the same. You don't understand what propaganda is then, because you can change the channel and you'll get a different opinion. You don't get that under actual propaganda, and it's the same people who are running it, all the way top. It'll be different flavors. It's more sophisticated than it was just Pravda, just one story and everybody, got one. It's much more sophisticated, but the difference between propaganda and real censorship, and again, having Fox versus MSNBC or something, you can change the channel. So anybody who's experienced the real thing knows not to make those comparisons. But yeah, the shirtless thing, it's hilarious, but it's not an accident. It's not clowning. It's a very serious part of the robust czar. Has to be strong, and that's why whenever he gets sick, he disappears. And everybody gets, where's Putin? Where's Putin? It's a big mystery. And it's usually because he's actually, maybe ill, has the flu or something, and you cannot show. You cannot be on TV looking pale, looking weak. When you're the dictator, you have to be strong.
Mm-hmm. Okay, quickly, so the question is about future. Belarus, and democratic Russia. Relations? I hope Putin will not annex Belarus before he leaves the office, so which can happen. So, but again, doubt, because it doesn't bring any benefits. So he doesn't have money to pay directly to the population of Belarus. I think it's as much as I can expect. So Russia will have good relations with Belarus, and hopefully eventually with Ukraine, because this is another important issue. I believe that Crimea is not something to be discussed in new Russian parliament, whatever. This is, this is a result. It's a loot. It's a crime, international crime, and I believe that the new transition government, whoever runs Russia after Putin, must abolish all the anti-constitutional acts, whether they're domestic or foreign. So that's why Russia will have to abandon, its imperialist past and make sure that it will have no more claims to the territories that are internationally recognized as part of other countries. So that's a little bit of Russia. Now it's people ask me about cooperation with Limonov and others. So look, I have nothing to be sorry about because what we did in 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, we created a coalition that stood for free and fair elections. And it was very important because we never gave up, any of our beliefs, to include others into the coalition. I think it's very important that people support right ideas because, it was a moment where I believe, if we had enough momentum, we could bring different groups of people from the left, from the right, by Russian, of course, definitions, into one coalition to force the government to have elections. Because in Russia we were never trying to win elections; we were trying to have elections. And fighting dictatorship, it's very different, from fighting political campaign because your agenda is very, very small, so it's more or less like a referendum, if you look at, for instance, at the referendum against Pinochet in Chile in 89, yes? So you had, in order to get to win the referendum, you had different political groups, even communists and Christian Democrats getting together. Those 16 years before, they were fighting each other. So same there, I thought we could do it. Unfortunately, it failed. Again, regime was quite, subtle in dividing our groups. Yeah, and today we could see a lot of people, from the former coalition now supporting, Putin's, Crimea annexation. But, for those who say it's all Limonov, I can start naming, many so-called liberals who unfortunately, are sharing the same, imperialist agenda. So, then the question about this falling other former Soviet republics, Azerbaijan, so where I was born and raised. So there are political prisoners. Yeah, I do know that. And I'm also currently I'm chairman of Human Rights Foundation, New York-based Human Rights Foundation. I was appointed after Václav Havel, and we have been forcefully criticizing dictators all over the world, including political prisoners in Azerbaijan. One of the latest reports, Kazakhstan. Journalists. The journalists, we follow the stories. If you go to HRF, website, you'll find the stories, about people who are fighting for freedom around the world, and they're supported by us. We run so-called, it's a very famous dissident forum called Oslo Freedom Forum every year. So there are 7 editions, and it's by far the biggest dissident gathering in the world. And we had political activists, dissidents, from North Korean defectors to gay activists from Uganda, or from independent journalists in Latin America, all gathering in Oslo. And every year we give awards. Václav Havel Award for Creative Dissent. So I welcome you to look at our activities. And we are very forceful when it comes to violation of human rights. Whether those countries are, American allies like Saudi Arabia, yes, we are very, very, very negative about the human rights record in Saudi Arabia, and we're regularly now publishing stories and criticism.
Right.
So
that's been an important element as well, because one of the things that gets lost a little bit as far as in the GOP and in others making the political arguments, again, the pro and for, is Israel and the human rights situation and what will happen, as far as if the United States packs up completely from the Middle East and says, well, here are the keys to the neighborhood, Iran, take good care of everything, and takes off. And that was one of the statements as far as, keeping track of the human rights records, because generally places that torture their own people aren't really good with their neighbors. There's a pretty consistent record there, and certainly that's one to talk about.
So one question is just, it's in English, but I guess it came from a Russian person. Yeah, what was the real reason of participating in political life in Russia? Real reason? Real reason. I don't know the real reason.
I'll tell you, there's no money in it.
I ended up in exile. There's some things you do because you believe it's the right thing to do. And I grew up in an environment, my family environment where there's the people. We didn't have big heroes there, but everybody followed sort of dissidents and admired Sakharov and others, who were fighting for freedom at that time. So I thought, in 2005, it was like my moral duty to do, what I could for my country. It's like defending, its colors. I had very little illusions at that time that I could, change things as dramatically as I did at the chessboard. When people asked me about, my expectations in 2005, and, whether my chess experience could help me in, anticipating the moves of Putin's regime. So I said no. I said it wouldn't help because in chess we have fixed rules and unpredictable results. And in Putin's Russia is exactly the opposite. Then question about Karpov. So it's about Karpov visiting me when I was in jail. So as I said, it was a vegetarian time. In 2007 you could end up in jail for 5 days. Today, for the same crime, quote unquote, peaceful protest, you would end up in jail for 5 years or worse. So Karpov actually hasn't visited me. He tried to, but he was not. nobody was allowed to visit me. So I spent 5 days. They were just talking to my guards. So it changed our relations because I paid attention to the fact for those who visit. Some people try to actually show solidarity, as Karpov did, and a lot of people, by the way, pretended they didn't know me. So I said the first question I asked my mother after returning from jail, I said, "Mom, who didn't come?" And I actually, to my surprise, I had to cross quite a few names. Yeah. So our relations improved. I even supported him in 2010 when he ran for president. But it was temporary. Now we're both back to square one. I'm fighting the regime, and he is a member of the parliament. Who supported annexation of Crimea. The Navalny movie about Chaika, about Attorney General in Russia, and about criminal business. Look, I don't think this movie needs any comments. So I could recommend for those who following the Russian documentaries made on the internet. I can recommend the movie Who is Mr. Putin, a great one. So actually I knew these facts, but I watched it with great interest because it's 100 minutes of sort of condensed story of Putin's connection to organized crime. It's invisible. Organized crime. So it's not just KGB, it's organized crime and it's invisible. So again, I don't think that we have to waste our time just to talk about Chaika, Bastrykin, the head of the investigative committee, Putin. So it's very clear that the organized crime now is very much calling the shots in Russia. Question about Iran agreement. I'm getting speechless. Yeah, this agreement, as I said it from the very beginning, as the entire Obama Middle East policy, will have consequence for many years to come. Because what's happened with this agreement, Iran was, Obama's administration created, a regional power. Iran now is the most powerful country in the region. It controls half of Iraq. It has Shia, aggressive Shia movements, in the whole region. And I'm afraid that the consequence of this foolhardiness will mark the next presidency, whether it's Hillary Clinton or, say, Marco Rubio. So next administration will have to deal with this disastrous agreement, because, as Mick pointed out, it's not just Sunni-Shia conflict. Israel is just next door, and the Sunni and Shia extremists, they can kill each other, but one thing always brings them together: is when they're killing Jews.
Can't end on that note. So one last one, just because this was probably the most common question, or one of the most common questions we got on the book tour. We were in 10 different cities, and then we can end on a positive note from the book tour as well. But first a negative one, but you have good answers to this one as well, so it's okay. Which is, speaking up as you are you in any way scared of ending up like Boris Nemtsov? And now, with the positive one's coming. Don't worry, that's the negative one. We wanted to start with the negative.
No, it's the.
But you take precautions.
Look, there's nothing I can do about it. I left Russia, so it's quite. Living in exile is quite challenging. My mother still lives in Moscow, and Skype is not the good replacement. So when we try to meet, so she's 78, flying to New York is quite far for her. So we meet in Europe. It's in Estonia or most often in Croatia. So that's where I spend our vacation. So it's Christmas, New Year's Eve. So now I have a 9-year-old daughter, so that's why I have to. So the plan our family vacation is based on her school calendar. Yes, she's here in New York. So it's the only good thing I can tell about my life is that it's very hectic. So that's why this is probably the best protection. Because my schedule is quite a mess, so I go back and forth. So that's why I don't have a routine. Yeah, so it doesn't provide enough comfort for my family. Yeah, but that's the best I can do under current circumstances, and I don't drink tea with strangers.
Speaking of family in the book tour, we can't end without the Kansas City story, where we were briefly joined, which made our book tour much more interesting to see through just slightly different eyes. We were joined by Gary's son, Vadim, who still lives in Moscow.
So you don't know. 3 kids here, 1 in Moscow. So he's 19, so he's just at the first year in college, and he joined me for 5 days. So he joined me in New York, and then Mig and I and Vadim went to St. Louis, in Kansas City, and Chicago. So the story that Nick wanted me to tell was we landed in Kansas City, and it was just a few days after the end of the World Series. So it's a big disappointment for Mets. Yeah, and a big triumph for the Royals. Yeah, and yes, in Kansas City, and we looked at the local press, and then just some reports on iPad, and I think there was a picture there.
Yeah, there's this incredible picture from the rally.
Incredible picture from the rally
to celebrate
in Kansas City, and that's 800,000 people celebrating the triumph of the Royals. So, and I looked at this, I just glanced and just moved on, and Vadim was looking at this picture, and I said, so what? I said, wow. He said, what a rally. Spontaneous. I said, yes. I said, Daddy, hopefully, one day, rather sooner than later, we can see the same spontaneous rally of 1 million people in the Red Square. And that'll be the end of Putin's regime. So,
thank you all for coming. I am going to lead Mr. Kasparov to the signing table. So if I could get you, so if I could just have a moment to get him to the signing table. If you have questions, out there, and